Hello, you are listening to Cinderblock Sports. Thank you for listening to a replay of our June 15th show in which we had Cliff Corcoran of theathletic.com and really one of the foremost baseball writers of the last decade and a half or even longer join the show last week to discuss Major League Baseball in general, the Cleveland Indians, the Minnesota Twins, and really just a long list of baseball topics. Cliff has joined the show before. He really is one of the best baseball writers I have had the pleasure of speaking to. He's been part of multiple baseball prospectuses and other books on baseball. So please give him a listen. And if you like the show, please give us a like on YouTube, on Facebook, anywhere you listen to this show. If you download us off of iTunes, please a like, a follow, a comment, a review. It all helps. And again, we do hope you do enjoy the show. We hope you enjoy the interview with Cliff Corcoran. And before we start with Cliff, I really want to share this story because I think it speaks to how great a guy he really is. When I first interviewed Cliff, for some reason, I could not say his last name. He could not have been more accommodating, more understanding, and since then has become really a fixture on the show, and he's always available for us. So, great guy. Please enjoy the interview and listen to us live on skoradio.com. the TuneIn app, Simple Radio, or any Roku device, Saturday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m.
And now, here is your host, John O'Donnell.
And welcome back to Cinderblock Sports. I'm John O'Donnell, joined by Aaron, the voice K-Back.
The voice.
And we are joined now by Cliff Corcoran, who is a writer for theathletic.com. If you followed baseball at all in the last 15 plus years, Cliff has been with SI.com. He's been part of many baseball books. He's joined the show before. He's just a great baseball guy. We're lucky to have him because the calendar turns to June. Father's Day comes. It's time for baseball. So, Cliff, thank you for joining the show, and how are you today?
Doing well. How's it going?
It's great. It is great. And in Cleveland, it's getting a little bit better as the Indians are starting to show some life. But from your perspective, as a baseball guy, we're halfway through the season, roughly. Not quite there yet. But what are your one or two biggest storylines that we've seen so far in Major League Baseball?
Well, I think absolutely the Twins, because nobody expected them to be doing what they're doing, and I don't know if they're necessarily going to keep it up, but they're not just ahead of Cleveland, who seem to kind of cede the division to them over the offseason, but they have the best record and the best run differential in the American League. So the Twins are a huge story, I think, absolutely. And maybe Cody Bellinger kind of blossoming as a MVP quality player. We knew he could do a lot of things. We knew he could do a lot of things well. But the season that he's had so far has just been ridiculous. So I think those might be the two things that jump out to my mind immediately as the two major stories of the season to this point.
Twisting that Twins knife into our backs already, Cliff. I see what you did there. I agree. The Twins were just, I agree that the Indians, I don't want to say ceded the division, but they definitely gave the Twins an opening. But to think that Nelson Cruz and the rest of those softball players were going to hit like this for a whole half a season, I'm amazed by that. And is their pitching good enough, the Twins pitching? Is it good enough to hang on? Because I think that's really the question.
Yeah, well, that was my big doubt about them coming into the season, because obviously they made their lineup better. Now, I think their lineup is overperforming, and I don't think it's going to keep this up for the whole rest of the season. But we knew the lineup was better. They did that. I didn't think the pitching was going to get the job done. So, I mean, I have doubts about the Twins in general, but it's really hard to argue with what they've done thus far because, again, it's not as though they're overachieving. They have the best run differential in baseball. Right. Is the pitching good enough? I think that the pitching is good enough if they keep hitting. It's the balance of the two. And certainly Jose Barrios is a young talent. We knew he was good. The improvements that we've seen, like Martin Perez, no, probably not. Jake Odorizzi, maybe. You can kind of go down the line a little bit and go back and forth on the other guys. Their bullpen's been getting the job done. I think they're going to come back down to earth. I don't think they're going to finish as the best team in the American League. I think they're definitely overachieving despite that run differential. But are they going to come back down far enough and can Cleveland catch them? It remains to be seen.
And well, let's stick with Cleveland there for just a second. The Indians took 2 or 3 of the Twins, 2 or 3 of the Yankees. They seem to be playing better in June than they have April and May. Do you think that Jose Ramirez is going to turn this around? Because for me, he's the bat that's on that team that can make a difference. Is he going to turn it into a season that will help the Indians compete, or is he just kind of lost this year? It just seems really strange what happened to him.
It's really bizarre and kind of in the opposite direction of a Bellinger type guy. That, the fact that, and really there's not a lot of people talking about it, but the fact that Jose Ramirez has got a 60 OPS plus is bizarre. I mean, this is a guy who was an MVP candidate last year, and what I was arguing is one of the very best players in baseball, one of the best maybe 5 or even 3 players in the American League coming into the season, and he's been just awful. I do think he's going to turn it around. He's 26 years old. His walks and strikeouts are kind of where you would expect him to be. He's stealing bases. He's playing good defense. He's having bad luck on balls in play, and the power has kind of disappeared a little bit with that. So that, if you look behind it, you say, okay, well, he's just not making good contact, so it's not just bad luck, but he's a far better player than what you've seen. I do absolutely think he's going to turn it around.
And with only one trading deadline now, you have to, as a team, decide, are you going to be a buyer or seller quickly? And that time is coming. And so the Indians, like I said, in June they're playing well, but they have to have a good June, in my opinion, to become buyers, or at least not sellers, because if they start selling this team off, they're going to fire sale. At least, would you agree with that? If they're not competing, do you think they start looking to shop Kluber, shop Bauer, and those other pieces?
Well, the interesting thing, of course, was during the offseason, the big rumor that they were going to shop a pitcher in order to add an outfielder. And the idea there was that they thought that would create more balance on the team and make the team better. But now what we're talking about is are they going to sell, in a way that's not necessarily going to improve the team in season? I mean, the trick, of course, is having any confidence in Cleveland making their team better at all, because they had the whole offseason to do it and they didn't. So my skepticism with regards to the Cleveland front office right now is extremely high, and I'm sure yours is, and most of the people there. Might they start selling off? I wouldn't be totally shocked if they did, but I don't think they will. They're very certainly right there in the thick of the wild card hunt. Just a couple of games behind the Rangers, the A's, or whoever it is on the fringe there, the Red Sox. So they're in it, and of course the trick with this new deadline situation is that with the double wild card, more teams are kind of on that bubble, and they remain on that bubble later into the season. But without the waiver period, without the waiver trade period in August, like you say, that decision has to be made definitively by the end of July, or really before that, because you got to work out the deals. So it's going to force teams to make a decision that's harder to make than it might have been prior to whatever year was it, 2012, I think, when they instituted that second wild card. So it's going to be a tough call, but I think for Cleveland, look, they've got so much talent. If they have confidence that Kluber's going to come back, and Ramirez is going to straighten it out, I mean, I certainly think that we could see some balance restored to this division in terms of what we expected in the second half, with the Twins coming back down to earth, with those players coming back. But the Indians have to have, the front office has to have the faith to do it, and they didn't show any faith in the team in the offseason, as far as I'm concerned.
No, I agree 100%. And we've been joined by Cliff Corcoran, who is really a great baseball writer, not just from what we've been talking about, which is the in-season stuff and kind of the standings, but some other great topics that you addressed in one of your articles was Dallas Keuchel and Craig Kimbrell, who remained unsigned almost through half the year. And it was ironic, right? Because I think the week before they got signed, you had said, hey, here's where they're going to make the biggest impact. So I'm curious, where did you think they'd make the biggest impact, and how do you feel about the signings of Keuchel and Kimbrell, and how that went down?
Well, Kimbrell landed exactly where I thought he needed to, and that was the Cubs. A short reliever is going to make a smaller impact, but so you're looking for a team that was more in the thick of things, like a starting pitcher. You add a quality starting pitcher to your rotation, it can make your team significantly better. You add a quality short reliever, I'm always kind of skeptical about the size of an impact of a short reliever, but if you're a team that's really battling it out, being able to lock down a couple extra wins that maybe your current bullpen is going to blow is going to make a big difference. And so to me, the Cubs, with the problems they've had with closers staying healthy. And again, it's not really so much important that they're a closer, but certainly Kimbrell was a guy who was going to want to close wherever he went. They had an opportunity there. They had some injuries and poor performance in their bullpen, and they were right in this kind of cluster of, teams competing for that NL Central. So I think he wound up in exactly the right spot, and so far so good.
Yeah.
As far as Keuchel goes, I was looking for a team that, really didn't have anything in their rotation. There's a lot of teams that had maybe an injured pitcher that you like a Kluber, or the Yankees get Severino, or maybe Eovaldi for the Red Sox. A lot of teams that had a guy out there who could potentially come back and help out, or even a prospect in the minors. The Rockies had none of the above, and at the time that I wrote the article, and I wrote it when I did because the draft was the big issue. Once the draft happened, the draft compensation went away, and you knew those guys were going to sign. So the timing was not coincidental. But
right.
I looked at the Rockies and I said, at that moment they had a 4-man rotation really, because they had some injuries and some poor performance, and they had nothing. And nobody on the DL who was a starting pitcher who was going to come back and help them. Nobody in AAA who was pitching well at all. Not even like a retread veteran who was pitching well. They had nothing. So they really needed a guy like Keuchel, and the fact that he's a ground baller in Coors in this rabbit ball era. It was like a perfect fit. So that didn't work out for Colorado, which is very bad news for them. But the Braves certainly will benefit from him. I think that it was a good place for him to go. They also could have used a starter. The thing with the Braves is that they have so much young starting pitching talent, which is why I kind of looked past them. But certainly, they could use an extra starter if he's able to come up and be the slightly above league average type guy he's been for the last handful of years and continue to get ground balls. He's going to make that team better. And the Braves, he's not even with the team yet, but they've now inched past the Phillies in the first place. So I think he's going to have a big impact there.
Yeah, I think the Braves are going, I don't want to say all in, but Keuchel is one of those players that if he's hot, well, he's a Cy Young Award winner. He could really make a difference on that young staff. So that one surprised me as well, but boy, I think it could make a huge impact. And we're joined by Cliff Corcoran. Cliff, I'm sorry we're a little late here, but I want to ask you this too, because this was something that really struck home with me. You talked about hitting for the cycle as being an overrated, I don't want to say record, but over a category. And it doesn't happen a lot. And I'm curious as to your thoughts on how the cycle is overrated. And because of what happened this week, Shohei Ohtani and Jake Bauers, they're the same player, right? Because they both hit for the cycle.
The cycle's always kind of annoyed me. Certainly it's a great game, right? You've got 4 hits, you got 10 total bases, 3 extra base hits. You've had a great game, but there are better games out there to be had. If you get a home run, a triple, a double, and anything better than a single for your 4th hit, it's a better game than the cycle. But nobody's going to talk about it the same way they talk about, oh my goodness, the cycle. Right. So the thing that I always look at is total bases. The cycle is 10 total bases. Do you want to know how many different times a hitter has hit for more than 10 total bases so far this season alone?
A lot.
19.
Yeah, that's a lot.
19 batters have had a better game than a cycle in this season, and you don't know who any of them are, do you? There's 5 guys who had 13 total bases in a game. It's, those are better games. It doesn't have the hook of the cycle, and I get that. I get that, it's kind of like a fun, you fill all the categories sort of thing. I'm not like a total Grinch about it, but to me it's not a headline. It's just kind of like a quirky little fact. It's like, oh, isn't that cute? He did that, good for him. But the cycle has always bugged me in that way, in that, there are better games for hitters to have, and they happen all the time. And cycles are, I think, a little too common to get as excited about them as we do. So I'm a cycle Grinch.
Hey, listen, I'll give you the cycle argument if you'll give me the shift is bad for baseball. Can we trade those, or are you still going to hang on to the shift?
Oh, no, I'm hanging on to the shift thing, man. I'm sorry. I can't concede that at all.
No, and we don't have a long enough show to get into that. We've argued about that before. But let me get your thoughts on this. What is, in your mind, the most impressive, kind of in-game record? Let's take Cal Ripken and Joe DiMaggio and their season-long and career-long things out of it. But kind of like the in-game, stat that makes you really stand up and say, yeah, that is the most impressive.
That's a good question, because there's kind of an automatic limit onto it. I mean, on some level, I like the and I can't even pull them off the top of my head, but when you get a hitter who gets 6 or 7 hits in an extra inning game, that to me is tremendously impressive. Even though I'm sure there's probably a couple bleeders and maybe a lucky draw, dying quail or something in there. 4 home runs in the game obviously stands out. Of all the things that we talk about and we make these lists, no hitters, perfect games, cycles, 4 home runs in a game is the one that happens the least often. And of course, and even really today in, again, I mentioned before, the rabbit ball era, the home run rate this year is just shattering all the records in Major League history. But 4 home run games still don't happen very often. And so that's really exciting. And when it does, and of course, especially if you can get that guy to have, and, the 4 home run game is one of those things like the cycle where you can kind of see it coming, and the guy gets the 3 home runs and he's got another at bat and you tune in. So that one really, to me, is an exciting record. I also really enjoy when somebody steals a whole bunch of bases in one game.
Right.
If you can get a guy who steals 5 bases plus in a game, that's always fun to me. But I like the stolen base.
Well, Cliff, and unfortunately we're out of time, because things like the stolen base, the bunt, the hit and runs, those things are kind of going by the wayside. And the next time I have you on, I want to get your thoughts on that. But I do want to let you go. Before I do, you are a great follow on Twitter at Cliff Corcoran. And one of the things you mention a lot is jerseys and hats. I know you're a big connoisseur of those. So what is your favorite and least favorite jersey of all time, my friend?
Oh, my goodness. just a small little question at the end, right?
Come on. You cover this stuff all the time. You got to have one that you absolutely love and one you absolutely hate. There has to be.
All right. I will tell you, in the game today, and they fixed it because they messed it up last year, I like the Tigers road cap is one of my all-time favorites. They made the D too big last year and they put it back. I just think it's such a clean, elegant. I like, I'm not a big fan of like white outlines on things, and when you get like that orange on the navy, I just think that's sharp. That in the Twins is a mess right now, but the TC before they put the gold outline on it, I really like. Big fan of that one. Just picking a couple from the modern game.
Sure.
And then worst of all time might have been when the Blue Jays in the Roy Halladay era switched to that J with the bird sticking out one side, and their home caps were like a charcoal color.
Yeah.
It's very, very low on my list. One of the all-time worst.
Did you miss the Padres camouflage uniforms? Were you not watching them?
I don't even, yes. No, anything that involves camouflage is automatically at the bottom of the list. I mean, that I don't really consider those primary. I kind of think about what the primary uniform, but it's true. The Padres do keep those in regular rotation, and that opens up a whole can of worms about the military-industrial complex and things, as well as like why we're honoring, the military but not teachers and doctors and all these other things. And that's a whole other conversation. But yes, the camouflage uniforms of any kind are eyesores that carry additional problems with them.
Cliff, you are a great conversation as always. I will add that to the list of questions to ask you next time we have you on the show. Thank you for all your time. Happy Father's Day. I know you take great pride in being a full-time dad. So happy Father's Day. And again, thanks for joining the show.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
And that was Cliff Corcoran, who, if you can't tell, I could talk to that guy for hours. I have interviewed him before. There's just so much that comes out of his head about baseball. He has written about baseball in many, many different prospectuses and books. If you want to learn about baseball, go follow Cliff Corcoran, the work he's done for books, the work he does at The Athletic. Just a great guy, and appreciate him being on the show.
I was surprised that he didn't mention. We touched on San Diego and the worst uniforms. Right. That mustard yellow on Pooh Brown in the 80s. I couldn't look at that. I was like, anytime San Diego was on TV, I'm like, nope. I don't care if they're playing the Tigers. I'll watch something else, please. We were talking about the Indians in the wild card chase, and it got me to thinking, okay, where exactly they are. They are 4th down. They're a game and a half out of the second wild card spot.
Sure.
Here's why I don't like the Indians in the wild card chase at all, because right now they're fighting against the Yankees and the Sox. And that got me to thinking, wait a second, they're fighting the Yankees and the Sox. Why? Where did Tampa Bay come from? We're talking about the Twins, and we're talking about the Twins justifiably. And he mentioned every reason why we should be talking about the Twins. And I did want to mention that, every team is going to hit a wall. Every team hits a wall every year. And he touched on that beautifully. Every team hits a wall at some point in time. And I want to see how Minnesota bounces back from the wall that they are going to hit this year. Where did Tampa Bay come from?
Oh, hey, look, Tampa Bay's got a good team, and they've got Tyler Glasnow, who's on a 60-day DL coming back in mid-July. Another frontline pitcher. They have good pitching, they have good hitting, and dozens of people in Tampa Bay are watching that on a daily basis. I think that Cliff made a lot of good points, and you made a lot of good points. You hit on it with the Twins. Hitting regresses. Hitting in Major League Baseball is definitely a up and down,
bell curve,
cyclical type of thing.
Absolutely.
And right now, the Twins are hitting the cover off the ball. They will regress. They will not regress to sucky. They will still be very good at hitting the ball.
They won't be the St. Louis Blues.
And they play in a hitter's ballpark. I spent some time in Minnesota. Target Field is an outdoor park. One of the reasons that they built an outdoor park in Minnesota, which seems to be, it has as much common sense as a circular firing squad. The reason they did it was to allow for more ball flight and, more home runs. That's worked. And one thing that Cliff tweeted and mentioned is, that we didn't get into is launch angle. There's all this talk about launch angle. You know who had a great launch angle? Ted Williams, who happened to be the last guy to hit for 400 and was one of the best hitters ever. He had launch angle too. Launch angle's not new here, kids, but hitting the ball in the rabbit era, as Cliff put it, is giving the Twins a lot of hope. And I think they're going to regress. I don't think their pitching is very good. I know they've got some good young pitching on Barrios, but I don't think it's very good. And the Indians could it's June, guys. The Indians could make a run at them.
You mentioned, we were talking about in-game accomplishments. I was really hoping he was going to touch on 4 home runs, because if you don't acknowledge Reggie Jackson and the 4 home runs he hit in the World Series, you've done a discredit to this game.
To me, it's still the perfect game. I get it.
Yeah. There's always a perfect game, but
I think a perfect game to me is just that. It's perfect. And you've shut down 27 batters in a row. You've won the game. The game is over. You could feasibly hit 4 home runs and lose.
You can.
You probably won't, but
you'll probably not. And again, you'll probably never see a perfect game. You'll probably never see a no hitter out of one pitcher ever again, because pitch count has become a thing that is cradled like a baby.
Well, Mike Fiers just had a no-hitter this year.
Really?
Yeah.
I slept through that.
We have one. Well, that's because you sleep. Well, you work through that. We talk to sleep. Again, if you guys want to get your thoughts here, you can call the show 234-200-5110. We were joined by Cliff Corcoran, and we will be joined by Rick Carpenter if he gets out of bed here in the next segment. I want to spend a few minutes here talking about the Indians. Cliff and I talked about it a little bit. They are playing better in June. That is important, okay? June is when baseball officially starts. The season is 500 games long. It takes 13 months to play. We can't be watching in April and May when it's snowing and we're playing baseball. It has to start in June. It does start in June. And if you look at what's going on with them being the Indians were last in hitting, almost all categories, batting average, runs, home runs. They're middle of the pack now, and with their pitching being serviceable, their starting pitcher has been good, not great. They have the best bullpen in baseball. Okay, Brad Hand and the Funky Bunch are just shutting down teams from the 6th or 7th inning on. So your hitting improves, your starting pitching stays good. Kluber figures out how to pitch again when he comes back from injury. They can make a run at the Twins. I don't want to win the wild card either. 1, I don't know if we can. 2, the Twins are only 10 games ahead. Everybody treats this like it's unsurmountable. It's not.
No.
It's June, kids. We're going to play this. June. I think the World Series is in December this year. We've got a lot of time to catch up here. But if you look at the Indians specifically, they've got some good young hitters. And I mentioned Jake Bauers here with Cliff. He hit for the cycle. And he has an OPS, which is on-base percentage plus slugging, of about 750 in June. He's gotten now 3 home runs in June. He's starting to come around. He's never going to be a 300 hitter. He just has too many holes in his swing, but he can pop out 25, 30 home runs. Oscar Mercado looks like a great young infielder. An 817 OPS, couple home runs to start off the month. Good defense, good effort. Had a game-winning hit against Cincinnati earlier this week. Jordan Luplow, almost a 0.90 OPS and a couple home runs. So that young core of hitters, which again, they did not make a trade for an outfielder, those hitters are starting to actually hit the ball. Lindor, he is a man on fire. He's had a really good year. In June, he has been absolutely incredible, but even for the season, he's batting 300, 900 OPS, 11 home runs. Good hitter. And Carlos Santana put the guitar down and started hitting the ball with a baseball bat again. He's had a really good year, resurgence. Jose Ramirez is the key here, guys. I don't know why he sucks, but he does. He's under 200. He has no power. He's stealing bases left and right. Apparently, when he gets on base, he's late for something because he's always running, and he's stolen a lot of bases. He has got to come around. If he does, the Indians really do have a chance in the Central. Talking about the pitching, if they do start selling off, Trevor Bauer is probably their best bet. He will command a lot. He's under player or team control. He has a good contract. I think you could get a lot for Kluber, but you'd rather have these guys pitching for the Indians. Clevenger, before he got hurt, was fantastic. Now, hopefully he comes back, and he's still that. Kluber got hurt, but even before he got hurt, his ERA was like 6. He just wasn't pitching well. But he's Corey Kluber. He knows how to pitch. He's really talented. Hopefully it was injuries, not a lack of effectiveness, and we'll see him come back. So, we talked about the bullpen. Brad Hand at the back end in the ninth inning has been fantastic. All the other guys who nobody knows have also been fantastic. And I just keep saying, they do have enough pieces to make a run. Everybody's writing them off. Look back through history, guys. There's been a lot of teams 10 games back in June or even in early July who have come back and made a run and made the playoffs. We're going to take a break here. I was about to say our last break, but our show actually would have been over here as of last week. We are going into our third hour. We are going to have Rick Carpenter from Bad Friend Choices on, talk about what's going on at the Windsor Pub. We will talk all things NFL and more here on Cinderblock Sports on the SKO Radio.